Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead Cause Analysis podcast, your go-to place for insights on AI, software engineering, leadership, and everything in between. I'm your host, Dennis, an experienced tech lead, and I've been knee-deep in technology for the last 20 years. If you're new here, I usually tackle the latest developments in AI and software, but today's episode is a particularly exciting one. We're diving into the topic everyone seems to be buzzing about. DeepSeek's new R1 model, the reasoning model that's got industry experts, researchers, and even hedge funds doing double takes. We'll explore why R1 is making waves, what it means for AI development, and why even the biggest players like OpenAI are watching it with more than a little concern. So grab a cup of coffee, or tea if that's your style, and let's unpack what's going on with DeepSeek's R1 and its implications for the evolving AI landscape. Whenever a new AI model bursts onto the scene and instantly dominates benchmarks, it's worth paying attention. DeepSeek's R1 isn't just another large language model, it's what's being called a reasoning model. You may have heard of OpenAI's O1 or other chain-of-thought type LLMs that handle complex reasoning tasks by effectively thinking out loud. R1 follows that same pattern, but the interesting part is the level of performance it achieves and that it's all open source. We'll get into the details of its training approach, the surprising cost differences, and how a relatively young Chinese company out of Hangzhou is shaking up the AI world. But before we go too deep, let's talk about what reasoning models actually are. DeepSeek's R1 belongs to this new category of reasoning models. Think of them as a more methodical version of traditional chat-based LLMs. Instead of blurting out an answer right away, these models internally break down the problem, much like you and I might do on a whiteboard, before they finalize a response. Comparison to OpenAI's O1. OpenAI's O1 model popularized this approach. It literally tries different angles, revisits mistakes, then produces a more thought-out answer. R1 is said to match, or at least come remarkably close to, O1's performance on challenging benchmarks like AIME, Codeforces, and SWE Bench Verified. This is huge because O1 has been the reigning champion in this category. Previously, the only real competitor was Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking Experimental, and that model couldn't quite match O1's results. Now, R1 comes along and claims to match or outperform O1 in certain tasks, open weights and cheaper costs. On top of the raw power, R1 is open weight. Anyone can download it, tinker with it, or use it to build derivative models. If you're not up for dealing with massive downloads, DeepSeek also provides smaller, distilled versions that can run on consumer hardware, albeit with a dip in performance. Even more mind-blowing is the cost difference. Right now, you can access R1 through services like OpenRouter at a rate that's said to be 27 times cheaper than running O1. That's some serious cost-saving potential for startups and developers eager to experiment. Now, if you read through DeepSeek's research paper, and I highly recommend you check it out if you enjoy diving into the weeds, they provide a clear roadmap of how they built R1. It's surprisingly straightforward. First phase 1. Reinforcement learning RL on a base chat model. They started with DeepSeek v3 base, a regular chat model, and applied RL without any labeled examples. This approach is particularly effective for math and coding tasks where a model can check its own results programmatically. Second, emergent thinking time. During training, they noticed that the model began allocating more time to thinking when faced with tricky problems, like it spontaneously learned that complex tasks require deeper analysis. They call this the model's aha moment. That's a pretty striking example of how RL can coax emergent reasoning behavior without an explicit chain-of-thought dataset. Third phase 2, adding high-quality chain-of-thought data. They fed the model a small but carefully chosen set of chain-of-thought examples so it could learn to articulate its thinking steps more coherently. Then they broadened that training to handle a wide array of tasks, ensuring R1 can move beyond pure logic puzzles and into more open-ended scenarios. Fourth phase 3, refined reinforcement and RLHF. After that, they used a second pass of RL for tasks like fact verification, math coding factual Q&A, and then RLHF for more subjective human-centered tasks. By the end, they had a model that not only reasons thoroughly but also communicates in a single language, no weird mixing, and includes handy thinking and answer tags. The big takeaway: DeepSeek didn't rely on some completely novel, top-secret data pipeline. They essentially took known techniques, like reinforcement learning, chain of thought prompting, and RLHF, and stitched them together masterfully. Of course, we can't talk about a cutting-edge AI breakthrough coming out of China without addressing the geopolitics. DeepSeek is a Chinese startup backed by High Flyer, a hedge fund with around $7 billion under management. They're not some trillion-dollar entity, so it's surprising they managed to train a model this sophisticated despite the constraints on GPU exports and the massive infrastructure demands required to train advanced LLMs. This isn't an isolated instance either. Other Chinese organizations, Alibaba with QWQ and Kimi with K1.5, are also pushing the envelope. So Western giants like OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic have to be keeping an eye on this. In fact, OpenAI has publicly called for more U.S. support in AI development, seemingly to keep pace with Chinese advancements. If you've followed U.S. policy, you might recall some attempts at restricting high-end GPUs from getting into China, precisely to slow down AI progress. Yet here we are. These new models, led by R1, appear to show that advanced AI breakthroughs can happen with fewer resources than expected. A box of scraps in a cave kind of scenario, as some have humorously noted. Now, is R1 truly on par with O1 in every single way? Not necessarily. Benchmarks can be gamed, and they're never the full story. Anecdotes are popping up that show R1 making mistakes, getting confused, or gaslighting itself over the simple facts like how many R's are in the word strawberry. Additionally, just like Western models have guardrails around sensitive topics, R1 has its own set of constraints, often refraining from commenting on politically sensitive topics from a Chinese perspective. So open source doesn't always mean fully uncensored. At the same time, we shouldn't lose sight of the broader implications. Even if R1 lags behind O1 by a small margin in day-to-day usage, the gap is clearly narrower than many assumed would be possible. And we know from the pace of AI research that iterative improvements happen fast. Today it's R1, tomorrow R1.1, R1.2, and so on. Who knows how soon we'll see an iteration that definitively surpasses a 1 in real-world tasks? As a longtime tech lead, I'm particularly intrigued by how this changes the game for companies that rely on AI-based services. With cost being such a massive factor, cheaper access to advanced reasoning capabilities could open the door for startups building specialized AI tools without worrying about astronomical API bills, companies hosting their own AI for privacy or security reasons, now that open-weight reasoning models are feasible on smaller hardware, developers and DevOps teams who want to tinker, train, or fine-tune reasoning models for domain-specific tasks without locking themselves into a single vendor's ecosystem. But the question remains, will the proliferation of these advanced open-source LLMs lead to a more collaborative environment or spark an intense arms race in AI? On one hand, open access fosters innovation and broadens the developer base. On the other, it might escalate national-level competition. Where do we go from here? I suspect we'll see a wave of reasoning model clones and improvements in the next few months, some from well-funded labs, others from indie researchers leveraging open-source releases like R1. The AI world is evolving faster than even many industry insiders anticipated. If there's one key lesson from R1, it's that game-changing AI models aren't restricted to billion-dollar companies. The barrier to entry is falling, and that could democratize AI development in a very big way, or at least shift the power dynamics we've taken for granted in the last couple of years. And hey, if you're a developer out there, you might want to check out R1 or the smaller distilled versions yourself. There's no better way to understand these models than to roll up your sleeves and see how they perform on your tasks. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode of Lead Cause Analysis. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical nitty-gritty of R1's training regime to the geopolitical undercurrents fueling the AI race. It's an exciting and sometimes daunting time to be a technologist. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps keep us going. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Dennis, signing off. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep building those amazing solutions. Thanks for listening. See you soon.